Welcome to the Instituto Cervantes of New Delhi. It's a great pleasure to be here today for the release of Don Quixote in Kashmiri. I must apologize for the delay. We are still expecting Mr. Surinder Pandit, who is the grandson of the translator and the architects of this work also. He's coming. He asked us to begin. But let me first say, thank you very much, Dr. Karan Singh, for joining us here today. It's a great honor for us. I'd like to remind that Dr. Karan Singh inaugurated this center in 2009 with the 10 Prince of Spain, Felipe, and the Princess Letizia, who now are kings of Spain. And it was really a great occasion. Every time Dr. Karan Singh comes here, you know, it's a big joy for all of us. I would like also to welcome the Press and Cultural Attaché of the Spanish Embassy, Mr. Guillermo Martin Senderos. Thank you very much for being here today on this occasion. And very especially, you know, Mr. Professor Dr. Dragomir Dimitrov, who has come all the way from Germany to be present here on this occasion. And last but not least, Professor Mahesh Deokar, who is here, the publisher from Pune University. And I would like also to thank all the distinguished guests here. You know, so many people, so many good friends sitting here. And I will mention especially Dr. Syama Prasad Ganguly, who has a great interest in this session, because the history of the reception of Don Quixote in India in itself still has many points to reveal. As still some secrets are there that we would like to know better how Don Quixote came to this country, in which form it came, in which language it was translated. And all of this, you know, it remains to our contemporary story, and it's really, you know, a bond between Spain and India. I would like also to mention, of course, the great Pandit Nityanand Shastri, Surindranath Pandita's grandfather, who was, please, a big applause for Mr. Surindranath Pandita, who's here now. Please, join us on the days. Thank you very much. We know how the traffic is in Delhi. So Nityanand Shastri, as was saying, it was the translator of this book, along with his assistant, Jagadhar Zadhu. Now, this is a very, I won't tell the whole story, of course, because we have people here that know much better, but just to give you why we are here today. And this is the second time that we are here with Professor Surinder Pandit, because it's the second Don Quixote, as you see, second encounter with Don Quixote, that we are. The first one was in Sanskrit, and the second one is in Kashmiri. And behind this text, to say that it's not a full translation, it's also a translation of a few chapters, but it is a very original work. And this was basically, you know, there was a collector in the USA called Carl Tinder Keller, and forgive me if I make some mistake, that commanded his friend Sir Aurel Stein, the famous Indologist and traveler. He commanded him, you know, to prepare two translations of Don Quixote, one in Sanskrit and another in Kashmiri. Because Carl Teller had more than 700 translations of Don Quixote in his collection, and he was crazy about that, and he wanted to produce new Quixotes in new languages. So he spoke with his friend, Aurel Stein, Nityanand Shastri, and from here started the whole story. To make it brief, by November 1935, it seems that both translations were almost ready. And then they were sent to America, and more or less they were almost forgotten, these translations. The translations were there, but they were not really known to the general public. All this began to change when Surendranath Pandita, here with us, inherited the library of his grandfather. And then he realized that there were two translations of Don Quixote in Sanskrit in Kashmir that were unknown all over the world. And as he describes in the introduction, he felt like the lone Kashmiri who knew about the existence of these translations, but nobody else knew about these translations. He wrote an article about that, and he published in 2000, 2001, and he published it in one book that says Western Indologies and Sanskrit Savants, and this came to the attention of several people, beginning with Dr. Stanislav Jagar from the Marburg University, where Professor Dimitrov comes. He located the manuscripts in Harvard, in the library in Harvard, and then he passed it to Jürgen Haneder, a doctor at the Marburg University, who used Don Quixote in Sanskrit to teach Sanskrit to German students, and he made a series of readings utilizing the Sanskrit translated by Nityan and Shastri. This, for a Spaniard, this blows my mind, because I cannot imagine one Spanish studying Sanskrit with a translation of Don Quixote. Now this is possible. Before that was impossible, but to be able for a Spaniard to study Sanskrit reading Don Quixote is something of a substance. And it is very, and you did that in Germany. So we had the German students studying Don Quixote in Sanskrit there. And this is the wonderful of the cosmopolitan aspect of culture. This went like that till finally, it came, Dr. Haneder wrote an article which the title tells a lot. La Mancha to Srinagar, the translation of Don Quixote. And this article and the article of Dr. Pandita finally came, and finally Dr. Dragomir Dimitrov took the task of editing it, and the first book is the third volume of the Pune Indological series, which is the Sanskrit version of Don Quixote, which was already presented and launched here 2 years ago. And now, finally, this volume is the fourth in the series, Pune Indological series. For us, this is a dream come true, and I will let them speak. But now, at least, we have two new Don Quixotes available, both in Kashmiri and in Sanskrit. Thank you very much. And I will ask Guillermo Martin Senderos to say a few words from the Spanish Embassy. Thank you, Guillermo.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Oscar, for your kind words. And thank you all for joining us today on the momentous occasion of the release of the Don Quixote in Kashmiri language. It is wonderful to come together to honor these significant cultural milestones in the world of literature and translation. But first, I would like to take a moment to express our heartfelt gratitude to all the professors and scholars present here with us today. Dr. Mahesh Ashok Diokar, Dr. Surendranath Pandita, Dr. Dragomir Dimitrov. And I would also like to commend His Royal Highness Dr. Karan Singh for giving us the pleasure of having him with us today. Don Quixote is a masterpiece written in the early 17th century, but still the themes of the novel, the pursuit of dreams, clash between reality and illusion, among others, are universal and can resonate deeply with Kashmiri readers. The translation of Cervantes' iconic tale is significant because it allows a diverse range of new audience to access and appreciate the classic literature, which at the same time promotes cultural exchange. By making the work accessible to new readers and introducing them to new values, ideas, and styles, it enriches the understanding of another culture. I'm going to tell you about my personal feelings whenever I hear someone talk about translations and the theme of translations. The Toledo School of Translators always comes to my mind. And I imagine great halls and scholars writing by candlelight. The Toledo Schools of Translators is a symbol of the Spain of the three cultures, a time of coexistence of the three religions of the book, and a bridge of ideas that connected Europe with Baghdad or Damascus, but also with Europe's Greco-Latin past. The translation we are celebrating today is heir to that long tradition, which is in fact the basis of all civilization, the exchange of ideas and thought. I also remember the words of the great Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges, who believed that translation can even surpass the original, and that the translated text does not have to be completely faithful to the original text. In this case, I haven't read the translation, and I'm afraid I won't be able to understand it. But I can't say whether the translation is going to be better than the original, but the material certainly deserves to be known by Kashmiri speakers. So thank you very much, you all, for making this possible. Thank you for all your work.
Well, we begin our session now. I would like also to greet, the ambassador of Venezuela, Mrs. Capaya, Ambassador Capaya. Thank you for joining us here on this occasion. And I would like to give the word to first speaker, Professor Mahesh Deokar.
Very warm welcome to all of you to this wonderful program and this great occasion. I'm really thankful to the Instituto Cervantes and especially to the dignitaries who are on dais. I remember coming here 2 years back in 2022 when we released the first Sanskrit translation of Don Quixote in the Institute. At that time, two of our today's guests, dignitaries, were not present physically, and Maharajaji, Dr. Karan Singh was, he gave his recorded message, and my colleague, friend Dragomir Dimitrov was present here online, and he spoke to all of us online. But I'm really happy this time that both of them are here. Dr. Surendranath Panditaji is also specially here for this program. As Dr. Pujol said, I mean, this whole endeavor of collecting different translations of Don Quixote was a crazy idea. I think that craziness still continues, and I think these two publications are also a result of that kind of craziness, because when Dr. Dragomir Dimitrov, with whom I was working since 2012, basically on different texts, Indological texts, grammatical texts, Sanskrit, Pali, but when he was in Pune as a Fyodor Lenin fellow, he came with this idea of publishing this Sanskrit translation in Pune. By that time, we had established the Pune Indological series at the University of Pune, Department of Pali and Buddhist Studies, which I'm heading for the last several years. And the series was established basically to publish works of visiting professors at the department. And Professor Dimitrov was at that time a visiting professor at my department. And the collaboration started. He had the manuscript by that time. By the way, he had also developed a special font for Sanskrit, which has again a history of 200 years. So the fonts which were used 200 years ago by August William Schlegel for printing Sanskrit books in Germany was reproduced on computers by Dragomir in collaboration with the CDAC, the Center for Advanced Computing in Pune. And another our senior colleague, Professor Shrikant Bahulkar, who was a great Sanskritist and Indologist, he accepted to do an audio book for this printed Sanskrit printed version. So the Sanskrit version was then prepared as a result of this wonderful collaboration between Germany, Pune, and also with different people and institutions. And I'm really happy that today we are here to do the second step of that wonderful collaboration. Dr. Surendranath Panditaji is always very helpful, very cooperative, and he was so happy to provide us all sorts of help. And it is just because of this collaboration that this translation, as rightly said, these are bridges. Bridges not just between two countries, languages, but cultures, but also among people and institutions. And I'm really happy that we have now built one more bridge. And as Dragomir has already mentioned in his introduction to the Sanskrit text, that Don Quixote's reception in India was exceptional, and there were translations of this text in many Indian languages. Marathi is also one of them. The state is our state language, and it has been appearing again and again in different forms. So I think there is a special relationship between India and Spain, and or Indian languages and Spanish for that matter. And I'm really happy that today we have this great opportunity to bring out the second step. And I'm personally happy and really feel proud to be a part of this. I'm myself not an expert in Spanish nor in Kashmiri, but I'm heading a department which works in the field of Indology. Being myself a student and a scholar of Pali and Sanskrit, I was really happy to be a part of this project and to be a part of this crazy team of people. So thank you very much, and my special thanks go to Oscar Pujol and the Instituto Cervantes for hosting this for the second time. And we are really happy that the Institute has taken such a lead to host this program, I mean for Sanskrit, now also for Kashmiri. And I don't know the future, but let's hope if we can have another opportunity with some more translations of Don Quixote in Indian languages. So thank you very much. I'm especially indebted to Maharajaji for his presence today. And my thanks are also due to Dragomir for being here personally. He's also visiting Pune and will be again doing another program in Pune with the Department of Spanish Languages in Pune University. So thank you very much to all of you for coming today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Professor Deokar. He hasn't mentioned, but Professor Deokar is working in a wonderful dictionary of Buddhist Sanskrit terms in several languages and already in the 8th fascicle. Now is the time for Dr. Surinder Pandit. You have the floor.
To all of you, His Royal Highness, respected Dr. Karan Singh, Madam Ambassador Her Excellency, His Excellency Mr. G. Martin Sendros, Dr. Oscar Pujol, Director of Instituto Cervantes, Professor Mahesh Deokar, Head of the Department of Buddhist Studies and Pali Studies at Savitribai Phule University, my distinguished friends, members of the other diplomatic corps, honorable dignitaries, and my great friend, the architect of the Sanskrit and Kashmiri translation of Don Quixote, Professor Dragomir Dimitrov of the University of Marburg, Germany, eminent scholars, guests in the audience, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Witnessing this moment of published Kashmiri translation of Don Quixote gives me a surreal feeling. After a long dream of nearly 9 decades, the translation is finally before us. For all this, the singular credit goes to Professor Dimitrov, who single-handedly coordinated every detail of this undertaking with dedication and indefatigable scholarship. I convey my deepest congratulations to him for making this remarkable work see the light of the day. I am equally duty-bound to express my grateful thanks and deep gratitude to Professor Jagger of the University of Marburg, who in the first instance located the abandoned Kashmiri and Sanskrit manuscript of Don Quixote from the unattended corner of the Houghton Library shelves in the University of Harvard in 2011. Professor Jürgen Hanider, who later arranged special classes for the study of the Sanskrit manuscripts at Marburg before its publication in 2018. The Kashmiri translation, commissioned way back in 1935, was inaugurated by Sir Aurel Stein at the behest of his Harvard friend Carl Tilden Keller when Stein requested my grandfather, Professor Nityanand Shastri, to prepare the translation. At that time, incapacitated by paralysis to hold the pen, my grandfather took the assistance of another Kashmiri scholar, Professor Jagadhar Zadu, to write down the manuscript of the translation prepared by my grandfather. Of course, Professor Jagadhar also collaborating in the translation. Together they completed the translation in less than a year's time. The first request Stein made to my grandfather was October 16, 1935. And when the translation was held, reached the hands of Oral Stein, it was again October 16, 1936, exactly 1 year later. The translation happened in less than a year's time, before the close of 1936, when the translation was forwarded from Srinagar, and Stein at the time was excavating in Iran. He was stationed in Kermanshah. From there, the translation via a detour to Oxford reached Keller at Boston in US sometime by early 1937. I was aware of the existence of the translation since the time I inherited my grandfather's library collection that included several letters Sir Oral Stein had written to my grandfather during the years 1935 and 1937 in connection with the Kashmiri and Sanskrit translation of this Spanish classic. And later on, I became familiar with the manuscript in Kashmiri through my aunt Kamla Shankar more than 25 years ago, when she gifted me the photographic copy of the original Harvard manuscript that had come down into her possession after the death of my grandfather sometime in December 1942. This copy was prepared to get the translation published in Srinagar. However, the plans never fructified for some unknown reasons, and the manuscript lay forlorn and unattended for nearly 8 decades when Dr. Dragomir obtained its digital copy from the Houghton Library, Harvard University in 2018, and today we have its published facsimile version in our hands. The facsimile edition is the autograph of Professor Jagadhar Zadu, who wrote down the manuscript. As I said, my grandfather was incapacitated to write himself. He could not hold the pen. So under the circumstances, the translation physically was written by Professor Jagadhar Zadu, and along with my grandfather, both of them prepared this. I have no doubt in my mind that given the cultic and iconic status of this 17th century Spanish classic, its twin translations into Sanskrit and Kashmiri are the single greatest contribution to the Western literature, Kashmir's single greatest and largest contribution to the Western literature. And that is also to state that Kashmiri translation of Don Quixote earns the Kashmiri language itself its highest recognition and honor for it being the most precious translation of any literary work that has been made into Kashmiri language. It may also be pertinent here to mention that the present facsimile edition of Kashmiri Don Quixote has not come a day earlier. Originally, it was planned to have a regular printed Kashmiri edition. This, however, did not come about in spite of several attempts to expedite the efforts over several years. A long delay thus occurred. It ensured, as a result of several unexpected reasons beyond control, to recompense the lost efforts and delay, it was thence decided to go in for the facsimile edition which we have today in our hands. As an interesting side information, it may interest this august audience to know that nearly a century and a half ago, the Kashmiri recension of a unique birch bark manuscript of the Atharvaveda of the Pipala the Shark, of which there existed only one copy in Kashmir, was published in an excellent photochromic facsimile edition by Morris Bloomfield and Richard Garvey at Tübingen in 1905. Incidentally, this manuscript of the Atharvaveda belonged to Professor Jagdar Zadu's grandfather, Pandit Keshobhat Zadu, from whom, after much persuasion and inducement, it was obtained sometime about 1875 during the Dogra Maharaja rule of Maharaja Ranbir Singh, the great ancestor of His Royal Highness Dr. Karan Singh, for the use of the eminent Vedic scholar Rudolf von Roth, then at the University of Tübingen. What may be important in the context of Kashmiri Don Quixote is that here we have the autograph of Pandit Keshobhat Zadu's grandson, Professor Jagdar Zadu, whose modern paper manuscript too now has been published as a facsimile edition, as was the case with his ancestor's birch bark manuscript more than a century ago. Both these facsimile editions are uniquely beautiful and deal with among the most important Kashmiri manuscripts presently housed in the West, one in Tübingen and the other at Harvard, and by a strange coincidence belong to the same Kashmiri family and carry the literary legacy of a direct family descent. To my best knowledge, till now, there are only 3 Kashmiri manuscripts published in facsimiles. 2 belong to the scribes of this Zadu family, as I said, the Atharvaveda and the Don Quixote, and the other being Shemendra's Lokaprakasha with commentary, written in the hand of Pandit Sahaja Bhatt, which has recently also been published by the Harvard Oriental series, under the Harvard Oriental series. There is no other instance where a manuscript of Kashmiri origin, to my best belief, has been published in a facsimile, and 2 belong to the scribes of one family, the Zadus. The other, of course, is of Pandit Sahaja Bhatt. The coincidence attains further uniqueness for the fact that this streak of scribes ran in the scholars of the same family, which was set merely by a time duration of not little over a half century. Within mere 50 years of time, 2 great manuscripts were written down by the people in the same family. At present, the facsimile edition of Don Quixote is written in the Devanagari script, being one of the 2 present-day popular scripts in which Kashmiri is written. It can now be hoped that the present edition generates a greater interest among the Kashmiri readers and inspires someone to prepare its Nastaliq version, that's the Perso-Arabic script, in which most of the Kashmiris write, the majority of the population, so that this great classic reaches the wider readership among the Kashmiris than the present edition can achieve, because it's read by a lesser number of Kashmiris, the Devanagari. Lastly, I thank the sponsors of this translation enterprise, the Department of Pali and Buddhist Studies, Savitribai Phule Pune University, Instituto Cervantes, New Delhi, University of Marburg, Germany, for giving the world yet one more exotic translation of the great European classic, and thus have added one more gem to the enviable corpus of Don Quixote, a universal legacy. For me, this culmination is the fulfillment of a personal dream and a great recompense for a long wait in seeing the work of my ancestor finally being published. To my dear friends, Professor Dragomir, Dr. Pujol, some debts will remain unpaid. My special thanks go to Professor Mahesh Diokar for accepting the present publication as a twin to its earlier Avtara in the Sanskrit edition published under the Pune Indological series. To every one of you here, my heartfelt and grateful thanks to everyone, every single person in this audience for sparing your valuable time in making the event memorable one whose impress shall ever stay indelible in my mind till my last breath. To all of you, to all the dignitaries on the dais, everyone in the audience, I thank from the bottom of my heart for your patience, for your appreciation, and for your effort in making this evening memorable for everyone. Thank you so much. God bless you all.
Thanks very much, Dr. Pandita, for these moving words, as you see. I would, before giving the floor to Dragomir Dimitrov, I would just like to remind you that I think very few people, even in modern India, know the role of Kashmir in Sanskrit literature. But for Sanskrit students like myself, we shouldn't never forget that this little valley in the Himalayas was one of the most fertile land for Sanskrit. Already in the first centuries of the first millennium, Kashmir played an incredible role in the Buddhist school of Sarvastivada, and that was from where many Chinese monks took their scriptures back to China. And Kashmir was already a key area in transmitting Sanskrit wisdom to Central Asia. But it continued, and we have great savants like Abhinavagupta of Kashmiri Shaivism, Kshemendra, already quoted, Mammata of rhetorics, and so many scholars, Sanskrit scholars in Kashmir, that I will just ask all of you a big clap for Kashmir and his contribution to Sanskrit. And now I give the floor to Dragomir. If you prefer sitting, whatever as you like, I think you have a PowerPoint, as you feel more comfortable.
Your Royal Highness Dr. Karan Singh, Your Excellencies, dear guests, friends, it's a great honor to be here, and I'm really very thankful to Dr. Pujol for inviting me and for having me here. I would present something as a continuation of my first presentation, which I was able to give only online 2 years ago in the summer of 2022. So that's why I decided to call my presentation Second Encounter with Don Quixote, as the translators decided to reproduce the English version of Don Quixote, which they used, because they didn't use the original Spanish, they used English. Those of you who attended the first launch of our first Don Quixote incarnation in Sanskrit 2 years ago, exactly the same place at the Instituto of Cervantes, might remember that at the end of my online presentation, I quoted some words from a song written by John Lennon called "You Are Here." And I am now very happy that I'm indeed here. So once again, muchas gracias to Dr. Pujol. Since today we have gathered to launch the conjoined twin of the Sanskrit Quixote, let me first remind you of the words from John Lennon's song. And let's continue exactly where I stopped last time. So now we can start our second encounter, in which I'll tell you a few more things about the partial Kashmiri translation of Don Quixote, which is the main reason for our gathering together today. I admit that I took Lennon's words to heart, not least the last line, "Let it be complete," and it bothered me indeed a lot that even after publishing the partial Sanskrit translation in 2019 and after releasing it officially in the summer of 2022, the work on this project was only half done. The mission was not completed since the Kashmiri translation of 5 chapters of Don Quixote, which Pandit Nityanand Shastri and Pandit Jagadhar Zadhu had rendered between November 1935 and September 1936, remained unpublished. The nice handwritten notebook, bound in 3/4 green Morocco, as is mentioned in the catalogue entry of the precious item kept at present in the Houghton Library in Boston, contains Zadhu's autograph of the Kashmiri text. Yet for several decades, since 1946, when Carl Tilden Keller bequeathed it with the rest of his rich Quixote collection to the Harvard University, it was paid no attention at all. It is true that almost immediately after the precious notebook reached America, Keller expressed his readiness to fund the publication of the Kashmiri Don Quixote, and for this purpose, in early February 1937, he sent from Boston to Srinagar via Oxford a photostatic copy of the entire handwritten text to be used for the printing in Kashmir. After the arrival of the photostats in Kashmir, however, for some unknown reason, the initial plan of publishing this unique work in India did not materialize. Thus, despite the initial plans and the preparations done more than 80 years ago, the Kashmiri Don Quixote had to wait until the summer of 2024 to see the day of light in the new volume 4 of the Punindological series. Lennon's prediction, the twain shall meet, has proven in this case perfectly right. For indeed, with the launch of PIS 4, the 2-volume set is now finally complete. Obviously, the two publications share many similarities, but naturally there are also some substantial differences. Besides a lengthy introduction covering the history of the entire Quixotic project carried out in Kashmir in the 1930s, the first book contains the Sanskrit translation, which was newly typed and critically edited there. The second book, on the other hand, is furnished with a comparatively short yet quite special introduction, for it was contributed by Surendranath Pandita, the grandson of Nityanand Shastri, one of the two Pandits who rendered the text into Kashmiri. As for the translation itself, you immediately notice that the text has not been typed anew, but it is provided instead in the form of a facsimile edition. I should stress here that this is not a complete copy prepared by some unknown Kashmiri Kayasta, but actually an autograph written by Jagadhar Zadhu's own hand. A unique document like this certainly deserves to be read and consulted in its own right. The Kashmiri translation is written in Devanagari script by using some orthographic conventions and spellings which may seem unusual to modern readers. Yet this volume allows now everyone to learn how, in the 1930s, the two learned Pandits considered it most appropriate to write a Kashmiri text in one of India's best-known scripts. What a qualified Kashmiri scholar could still do in the future is to provide, on the basis of the present publication, the same Kashmiri text in newly typed Devanagari and Nastaliq transcriptions, adding to this a scholarly study of the language as well as a glossary. Since this is something to be accomplished by someone else, with the release of the Punindological series volume 4, I consider my own job done. Let me now briefly address a question which at least some of those who see or hear about the published Kashmiri Don Quixote may raise, namely, who will read this? Or as Hindi speakers will ask, ye kaun padhega? Since the question obviously implies that a book of this sort will hardly find readers and is thus not worth the effort, it cannot be left unattended. In fact, already at the time when I was editing the Sanskrit translation, I anticipated a more or less skeptical attitude, and for this reason, in my introduction to the Sanskrit Don Quixote, I tried to respond to it, even though by means of one single Citation. I quoted there the words of the prominent 20th century Latinist and Tibetologist David Roy Shackleton Bailey, who, in defense of the art of textual criticism practiced by the British classical scholar Alfred Edward Houseman, once stated two important arguments which I consider equally valid in our case. First, said Bailey, a pursuit which engages the interest of a considerable number of intelligent people can empirically be reckoned with worthwhile. As the history of the Sanskrit and Kashmiri Don Quixote clearly shows, in the creation, reduction, and the preservation of the two translations, a remarkable plethora of learned people was involved. Apart from the American Carol Tilden Keller, a Harvard graduate and a resourceful book collector who first thought of procuring Indian translation of Don Quixote, this distinguished group includes two Indian Pandits, Nityanand Shastri and Jagadhar Zadhu, two British sirs, Mark O'Reilly Stein and George Grierson, as well as one of America's greatest Sanskritists, namely Charles Rockwell Landman. Their activities and letters leave no doubt in us that they would have felicitated today's launch of Volume 4 of the Omnidological series, for they actually wished the book to appear much sooner, more than 8 years ago. Let me remind you of a few pertinent excerpts and statements from their correspondences concerning the Kashmiri translation of Don Quixote. Thus, in one of Nityanand Shastri's letters from November 28, 1935, Stein added for Keller the following note. Sir George Grierson, the greatest living authority on Indian languages, now in his 86th year, and the true founder of Kashmiri philology, was delighted to hear of your translation enterprise. He is eager to see the Kashmiri version published. May this yet come about, but help would be needed for it. Keller was very pleased to learn about Grierson's appreciation of what he himself humbly described to us as a rather childish proposition of translating part of the Don in Kashmiri, and on March the 21st, 1936, wrote back to Stein, I certainly know who Sir George Grierson is, and am delighted at his interest in the book. I would consider it a great honor and incentive if I had a letter from the distinguished gentleman expressing his approval. On April the 7th, 1936, no one less than Grierson himself sent a letter to his good old friend Nityanand Shastri, expressing his desire to see the Kashmiri Don Quixote published soon. He wrote, I heard from Sir Aurel Stein that you were engaged in translating a book. I forget what it was. Perhaps it was Don Quixote. I hope that this has not been interfered by your illness, and that if it is not yet complete, it will soon be ready for the press. It is sure to be good. Since Stein was eager to meet Grierson's expectations and pursued the idea of printing the Kashmiri translation, he used every opportunity to remind Keller of the importance and usefulness of this enterprise. Thus, on January the 4th, 1937, while still in Beirut, on the way back from his excavations in Iran, the indefatigable 74-year-old British explorer wrote to his American friend, I am awaiting your wishes as to the printing of the Kashmiri text. As so little of Kashmiri literature is accessible to European scholars in print, a reproduction of the Don Quixote extras would serve a useful philological purpose. Sir George Grierson, that grand old man of Indian studies, and some other servants would be very pleased to receive copies. Later, on March 17, 1937, just before he underwent a risky prostate operation in Vienna, Stein also sent a letter to Nityanand Shastri assuring him that I should be very glad to have the Kashmiri translation carefully printed if you have kept a rough manuscript copy of it. The fair copy is in Mr. Keller's hand, who would prefer to keep it. Please ascertain whether the printing can be done and what 100 copies of it, properly printed in good type, would cost. I should be able to offer due remuneration for the proofreading. These quotations from Stein's, Keller's and Grierson's letters provides sufficient proof that the idea of publishing Nityanand Shastri's and Jagadhar Zadu's Kashmiri translation of Don Quixote in the form of a book very much engaged the interest of these learned men. Hence, following Shackleton Bailey's logic, we could say that our effort in bringing out the Kashmiri incarnation of Cervantes' classic should be reckoned worthwhile. The second point, which Shackleton Bailey raised in defense of one's squandering of intellect upon laborious trifles and other seemingly useless or quixotic undertakings, was that a society which cares only for work that is somehow aimed at the satisfaction of its lust for power or its physical appetites should be in a fair way towards an inglorious end of bombs or boredom. During the first years of my engagement with the Sanskrit Don Quixote, these words by Shackleton Bailey, which he wrote 65 years ago, appeared to me somewhat distant, less relevant and rather pertaining to pastimes, which Stein and his friends witnessed, unlike the long peaceful period post-war generations like mine were lucky enough to experience in Europe. I was impressed by the fact that in the second half of the tumultuous 1930s, a remarkable group of intelligent people put so much energy into fulfilling their quixotic dreams, regardless, or rather despite, the great evil which was already engulfing Europe and eventually the entire world. Well before the Second World War began, Stein wrote in early May 1935 the following lines about Germany, which he had just crossed on his way to Kashmir. It seems so hard to realize that a country where all looks so spick and span, even at industrial centers, can by its very spirit of discipline endanger the future of Western civilization. Less than 5 months later, the anti-Semitic Nürnberger Rassengesetze went into effect in Nazi Germany. One of the repercussions of these racist laws, which within less than a decade led to the Holocaust and the murder of some of Stein's relatives, was a massive purge of all university professors of Jewish descent who since January the 1st, 1936, were not allowed to occupy any position in Germany. By March 1936, Keller clearly recognized 4 pests, namely, first and worst, Hitler, the Charlie Chaplin of dictators, then Mussolini, then Franklin Roosevelt, and then our grimy old friend Stalin. And it is rather interesting, is it not, to see Germany repeating the historical error for which France so long suffered and from which Spain has never yet recovered, proscribing, killing, driving forth its best brains. 3.5 years later, as you know, the bombs started falling when on September the 1st, 1939, Hitler's Nazi Germany attacked Poland from the west, and 2 weeks later, on September the 17th, Stalin's Red Army invaded it from the east. By that time, fortunately, the Sanskrit and the Kashmiri translations of Don Quixote had already crossed Europe and were kept safely in America, where they waited for better times to come. When we first printed the edition of the Sanskrit Quixote in 2019, I was still eager to believe that, as far as Europe is concerned, such better times had permanently come, despite atrocities like the Srebrenica massacre in 1995 and the Russian occupation of the Crimea in 2014. I would not have mentioned most of these grim historical data here, were it not for one terrible news, which reached me on the very same day as I learned about the successful printing of the long-awaited Kashmiri Quixote. Literally minutes after I saw on August the 12th, 2024, the first copy of PIS 4, I read in the German Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung an open letter signed by most famous musicians such as Martha Argerich, Daniel Barenboim, Sir Simon Rattle and others about the passing away of an outstanding Russian pianist, writer and thinker about whom, alas, very few people knew and cared during his lifetime. On July the 28th, 2024, Pavel Kushner died as a political prisoner at the age of 39, while being held in a pre-trial detention center in the distant city of Birobidzhan, some 8,000 kilometers to the east of Moscow. His alleged crime was his unwavering opposition to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, his pro-freedom activism, and his audacity to call Putin openly a fascist. As mentioned in the open letter published in the reputable German newspaper and later translated in English, in other media, the story of Don Quixote repeats itself with a catastrophic ending that, unfortunately, is more typical of life than of literature. Indeed, the words spoken by Don Quixote in chapter 50 of the first part of Cervantes' masterpiece, Pavel Kushner, could have easily used to describe himself. Since meanwhile this chapter is available also in Kashmiri, we can first listen to the relevant excerpt which my friend Professor Mrinar Kaur was so kind to record for us.
Meç pan amich azmoish kırmız ki yan pet me veer vrat daran kor tan pet chus banyomut bohodur shishtaachari farakhvil kulin sab dildar sahasi sahanshil bechus hakan tan pet kud khan ki te jodugari hind kasht bardasht karit agarchi yat kathman kamai kal gavu Yele bă mot bănit lodhos yath panjaras mans to koruk band. Magar totich me pura asha ki agar da yetse te hajar korun ke yemi panye bojbal kin sapde bă kiensan duhan mans kun rajuk shasak. Yath mans raj karan bă panye hridij कृतज्ञता to udarta prakat karak.
Chavez's English version of Don Quixote's self-description can be also found in the printed book, and you can see it on the left side. It reads as follows: "This I can say for myself, that since I have been a knight-errant, I am become valiant, civil, liberal, well-bred, generous, courteous, daring, affable, patient, a sufferer of toils, imprisonment, and enchantments. And though it be so little a while since I saw myself locked up in a cage like a madman, yet I expect by the valor of my arm, heaven favouring, and fortune not oppuning, in a few days to see myself king of some kingdom, wherein I may display the gratitude and liberality enclosed in this breast of mine." And the Spanish original is also now here, visible on this slide. The tragic loss of a most talented and honourable yet lonely Russian Don Quixote is a poignant reminder how desperately needed is Cervantes' Mahavir in these difficult times of bombs and bloodshed. For this reason too, the publication of the immortal Spanish book, no matter whether complete or in part, and regardless whether in its original language or in some other tongue, including even such exotic languages as Sanskrit and Kashmiri, does not need any further justification. Let us hope that by launching the partial Kashmiri translation of Don Quixote, we can contribute somehow, no matter how little, not only to the study and practice of the Kashmiri language, but also to making this world a better place, where people live in freedom, peace and harmony. We not only need more Don Quixotes, but also have to know and never forget about them. Since they are often telling us the truth, no matter what other people may say about them, we should better listen to these brave madmen. Hence, I hope you wouldn't mind if, at the end of my talk, we hear Pavel Kushner's interpretation of Frédéric Chopin's Mazurka in A minor, which the great Polish composer finished in 1840, 9 years before he died, also at the age of 39, but unlike the imprisoned Russian musician, his death was caused by illness. As they say in Latin, vita brevis, ars longa, or life is short, art is long. Cervantes' book, now also in Sanskrit and Kashmiri, proves this most convincingly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dragomir, for this wonderful presentation. It really moves me to see that the continuation of these letters were written 19 years ago, almost, but the fulfillment of these letters is thanks to the work of these three persons here, Dr. Dragomir, Surinder Pandit, and Mahesh Deokar. Thank you very much for fulfilling the dream of Orel Stein and Nityanand Shastri. And now I will ask, His Royal Highness, Dr. Karan Singh, to make final comments.
Dr. Oscar Pujol, Senior Senator, is that the correct way to pronounce it? Dr. Mahesh Ashwin Devkar, Dr. Surendranath Pandita, and Dr. Dragomir Dimitrov, and distinguished members of the audience. It is always a pleasure to revisit the Cervantes Institute, because as was mentioned, I had the privilege of inaugurating this along with then Prince, now King Philip of Spain. Since then I have visited on several occasions, and I've always been very impressed by what is being done here by the Institute. The whole story of the way this Kashmiri manuscript was found and printed has already been detailed by the scholars who are here. I don't think I can add anything to it except to say that I'm glad that all of this happened during the rule of my ancestors. In Maharaja Ranveer Singh, Maharaja Hari Singh in 1935, under Dogra rule, once again the Kashmiri Pandits flourished, and the Sanskrit language was rediscovered and was presented to the world. The Gilgit manuscripts, for example, are the Kashmir series of texts and studies are a major contribution to Buddhist studies. It has been rightly said that Kashmir has always been a center of learning. Namaste Sharada Devi Kashmir Purvasini. Sharada, the goddess of wisdom, is always supposed to be living in Kashmir, because it's extraordinary how that small valley, only 20 miles by 80 miles, has produced such a galaxy of scholars. And with Acharya Abhinav Gupta, for example, must be one of the great scholars of the world. And how this valley produced these great scholars, the whole history of Kashmir Shaivism and the way that was developed, and the texts and all, it's all very, very fascinating. And it is good that this has been published now in this very nice facsimile edition, in this great novel, Don Quixote or Quixote, how is it actually pronounced? What is the Spanish pronunciation? Quixote. 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 Well, whatever. We will learn, we grew up calling it Don Quixote, but whatever. It's a great novel, probably the first real novel in the Western world, and a masterpiece. Don Quixote de la Mancha was made into a film also some years ago, and these masterpieces, the more they are translated, the better it is for them, because they get to a broader audience. And now the Kashmiris will also read it in Kashmiri, which I think is a great achievement. And Professor Pandita, I'd like particularly to congratulate you, because it was your grandfather who did the work. And you see, India is a land of multiple languages. No other country in the world can boast the number of languages that we have. If you take the whole of Europe, then only would you begin to look something like India. All the European languages together are less than the languages that we have in India. It's an extraordinary linguistic civilization. The Indic civilization has produced a whole galaxy of languages and great literature in all the languages, starting from Kashmir in the north, going all the way down to Tamil Nadu in the south. Every language has produced its own literature, its own masterpieces. And so it is good that the Kashmiri language has once again been enriched by this edition. I have really to congratulate all the scholars, and particularly you, Professor Dimitra, for the way that you've edited this. And this has been a truly international undertaking. You have people from Spain, you have people from Germany, you have Indians and all working together. Because the world of the mind is not cut up into narrow divisions. It's universal. And that is how scholarship is so important. And that is why scholarship needs to be encouraged. Because it is only through scholarship that the world civilization can really develop. And today the world is in a bad state, by the way, I must say. I'm quite shocked at the way things are developing. There are wars everywhere. There are wars in Europe, there are wars in Asia, there are wars in Africa, there are wars in Latin America. As humanity is going on, are we going towards self-destruction? I don't know. It's for the intellectuals to answer that question. But I must say that you remember there was a European philosopher called Arthur Koestler who said that the human race was a race programmed for self-destruction because of an engineering defect in the human cortex, whereby the thinking and the feeling aspects are inadequately linked. So although we know what should be done, we don't do it. And that is what is happening now. We seem to be going towards extinction. I mean, there are other philosophers like Sri Aurobindo and Tayyad Ishaq and all, who are evolutionary philosophers, who say human race is programmed for evolution. But the way things are going now, I'm afraid Koestler's prognosis may be correct. Because it is nothing short of suicidal, the way that our armaments are being used, hundreds and thousands of people are being killed, children, women. There's no distinction left any longer. There are no rules left any longer. If you bomb whoever's in that building gets blown up, whether you're a child or whether you're a woman or whether you're pregnant or whether whatever happens, you get blown up. Now, what sort of a civilization are we having in the world today? Is there any feeling? Is there any emotion left? Is there any compassion left? I don't think so. The way these two wars, for example, particularly in Europe and Asia are going now, in which literally hundreds of people are dying almost every day, nobody's worried. So I don't know. I think the springs of compassion, of karuna, have dried up. And what we see today is a total lack of any commitment to any principles, any laws, any rules. It has now become literally the law of the jungle. The one who is most powerful rules. That is called the law of the jungle. That's where we are now today. The powerful can get away with whatever they want to do, regardless of how many people perish in the way. You talked of what happened to Germany under Hitler. I'm old enough to remember, at least when I was at school, we used to read about the Second World War and all the terrible things that happened. And we thought that that was behind us, but it is not. It is not behind us. I do not know what the future will hold, but I do hope that at least in India, where we claim that we belong to an ancient civilization that has brought peace and harmony and spiritual realization, I hope that in India at least we are able to keep to the principles that underline humanity. principles of love and compassion and understanding and cooperation, rather than get dragged into the European dichotomies that have already destroyed the world, almost destroyed the world. And Europe is a great country, great philosophies, but the dichotomy always is there. It's never a proper coordination, I find, that there's a dichotomous, something built into the texture of Western philosophy. But the Indic philosophy, on the other hand, is, I think, more of creative. Ekam sat vipraha bahuda vadanti. The truth is one, the wise call it by many names. We should, at least we have tried in the past, to bring together people of different languages and different races and different religions. So friends, I will not take more of your time. I'm very glad you've invited me here, particularly because in our state of Jammu and Kashmir, there are several languages that are in the list of national languages. There's Kashmiri, there's Dogri, which is my mother tongue, there's Urdu. At least 3 languages spoken in Kashmir are national languages, in the sense that they're in the 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution. And Kashmiri, of course, have been very, very rich. So congratulations, everybody. And Oscar, keep up the good work. You've done a lot of work for India. Congratulate Oscar Pujol for all that he has done for Spanish studies, for Indian studies. And our friend Dimitri has come all the way from Germany. I'm European by birth. Did you know that?
Yes,
I was born in France, in the Hotel Martinez Arcan, room 318, 390, 320. I was a famous baby. So people know where I was born. And so I'm European by birth. That means I have some ambience there must be, because where the place you're born has a great impact upon you. I was not born in Kashmir. I was born on the Mediterranean. So I'm really, in a way, a world citizen. So Desho Bhavaratrayam, we have a marvelous phrase. The 3 worlds are my country. I'm not bound down by any particular thing, because we have got to develop a world civilization. We've got to come back to the deepest recesses of the human consciousness. That is what we must all try to do. I am now 93. I've seen a lot of the world. I've seen the First, Second World War, and I've seen all that has happened subsequently. And I used to be very optimistic. We used to go around the world talking about the global society and how everybody is going to be fine. But I must say, in the last 8 to 10 years, the reverse has happened. Rather than moving towards the global society, we're moving once again towards narrow nationalisms and power politics. So let's try, at least in our own way, to do whatever we can to keep the human race alive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karan Singh, for these inspiring words, really. And we understand all your concern for the actual times. But I'm sure that if Cervantes would be alive, he would be talking in the same terms that Dr. Karan Singh is speaking. Because he was also a man who believed in humanity, in spite of all the difficulties of his time. And we are arriving to a close of this program. We will celebrate it in the Spanish and Kashmirian way, because we have some Spanish wine and we have some Kashmirian food in our menu after the event. So enjoy both Spanish wine and Kashmirian food. But before, calling this out, I would like, to open the floor just 10 minutes before closing this session, for if any person wants to say something, please. Dr. Ganguly? Huh? Please.
very much. I am somehow connected to this whole project for quite some time. Mr. Pandita has been, if not a very close associate, but he appeared on a day when Cervantes' 400 years were being celebrated, and he gave me a copy of the Kashmiri and the Sanskrit translations that came from Harvard. And somehow when I published my work on Cervantes and his reception in India, the cover of that book is an imprint of that Kashmiri version that you gave me, and it makes me really, very satisfied that somehow I am connected to all that is being told here, retold here, and investigated here. So therefore, thank you very much. I have a few things to talk to Dimitrov, but later, not now, because there are certain comments that he had made in his first book, where my work figures, and there are certain errors that have occurred there in my own work, which must be told to Dimitrov so that he can, for his future references, correct them. That's all I wanted to contribute here. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Any other question? I would like to mention, if there is no further question, and we may go there, that we have here also among us, a very special person, because this is a celebration of Don Quixote. And we have here the first person who translated Don Quixote straight from Spanish into Hindi, which is the Professor Viva Maurya. A loud clap for her, because she took Don Quixote from the original into an Indian language. We have also a original translation into Bengali by Tarun Gatak, and I am not aware if there are any more translations straight from Spanish into Indian language. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Ganguly.
Just wanted to, sorry.
Please.
Yeah. Dr. Dimitrov, thanks a lot for this wonderful presentation. We got introduced, and just on the Sanskrit translation, you were there again connected. And Dr. Pandita had predicted that point of time that why not the Kashmiri version also coming out through you. And today we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, that it is there. My question is simple. This is just for the younger generation. That what actually inspired you to do this? Because somewhere you must have been a Indian in the past life. That, something connected. And as Dr. Pandita always says, that destiny is the strongest magnet. So, if some words can be also expressed about the fact that what made you do this work, just as a story or something inspiration for us.
You mean this particular work, or?
The entire Sanskrit and the Kashmiri translation, because we couldn't do it. So somebody from outside had to come and do it for us.
There is one short answer, Bhagwan ki baat. I don't know.
That's great.
It's a matter of destiny. Well, to be more serious, I could just mention it's just a family detail. My father has in his library the letters by Nehru, and this was my first exposure to India, and we also had the Ramayana translation, and I somehow got interested into this. But all the rest is a matter really of chances, happy chances, and I'm very happy that I'm in a position to be here and to be studying the culture and the history of India. And I'm very grateful for you coming today here to honor this book launch. Thank you very much.
Thank you to you as well.